كانوا قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون.
Science is not the only yardstick for truth, because there are other sources of knowledge. And for me, this is the most frustrating, is that people are not even bothered to read a basic philosophy book. Philosophy 101. If you're 16 years old and buy an A-level standard book on epistemology, the study of knowledge, and you would see that there are other sources of knowledge other than just touching and feeling things. One of them include testimony, believe it or not, the say-so of others. And let me summarize what I'm saying with what happened a few years ago with Professor Lawrence Krauss. So obviously I did a few mistakes as well. People change. If you're the same person you were 4 years ago, then you have issues. So I follow kind of a Bruce Lee philosophy. You should be like a river that you keep on flowing, right? So I'm not the same person. You don't step in the same river twice, as they say, because it's changing, isn't it? Yeah. But anyway, there are some good things to learn from that discussion with Mr. Krauss. And I said to Krauss, "Hey Krauss," I didn't do it that way, but you know what I mean. I said, "Hey Professor Krauss, you have a metaphysical presupposition. You think that truth is as a result of what you touch and feel." He's like, "Yes, of course, I'm a scientist." And I said, "Fine, but there are other sources of knowledge." He said, "Like what?" And I said, "Testimony." And he sniggered at me. He said, "I just do the science." And I said, "Well, do this science. Do you believe in evolution?" He said, "Yes, of course, I follow the evidence." And then I said to him, "Have you done all the experiments yourself? Have you done all the science yourself?" And then he paused. Everybody started to laugh at him, or lots of people started to laugh at him. Why? Because it exposed his metaphysical presupposition. It is true that he has to rely on the say-so of other scientists, because he ain't going to do the science himself. And if you rely just on your own experiments that you've done directly, you will never have the science you have today. And that's the beauty of human knowledge. You have to rely on other people. And that's why if you study the scientific method, you would see that a key part of the scientific method are the sayings of other scientists, are the conclusions of other scientists. Now you may claim, yes, but their studies are repeatable, and they have been repeated. If you haven't repeated it yourself, it's still the say-so of others. It could be one scientist or 500. The fact that they are telling you the basis of that knowledge is not empirical, it's the say-so of others. Now what's very interesting, there's been a revival in Western epistemology on the issue of testimony in the past 30 to 40 years. For example, you had the 1991 book by Professor Cody. He wrote the book Testimony, a Philosophical Discussion, and he basically argues that testimony is not only a source of knowledge, it's a fundamental source of knowledge. It's fundamental, it's indispensable. And so he basically argues that testimony is not only useful, but it's a fundamental source. And he quotes David Hume, the famous Scottish skeptic, that disagrees with Professor Cody. And David Hume basically says, look, testimony is useful for the wise man, but we only accept testimony, because it's in line with our collective experiences. So Professor Cody, being a genius, what does he say? He says, hold on, Mr. David Hume. What do you mean by collective experiences? Because the only way to understand other people's experiences is to ask them and they will tell you. So he's actually shown that testimony, the say-so of others, is fundamental to knowledge. Because if David Hume is saying that yes, testimony is useful, but it's not fundamental because it has to be in line with our collective experiences. Well, how do you know what people's collective experiences are? It's only via testimony. So it's a really good book that I think you should read that shows that testimony is fundamental. Now, by the way, testimonial knowledge could be wrong, just like our empirical knowledge could be wrong. I'm not saying it's accurate. I'm saying it's a fundamental source. Now, what we have to do to find out what constitutes valid testimonial knowledge, that's a different philosophical discussion. And what's very interesting, you have many talking about this. Dr. Elizabeth Fricker, she makes a really good point. She says, look, given my limitations as parametric, given that I'm a limited human being, I can't know everything. I have to rely on the authority of others, which is simple as that. Benjamin McMyler, Associate Professor Benjamin McMyler, he says that in order to have testimonial knowledge, the one who's giving the knowledge has to basically have the responsibility of referring back to people's challenges, and the audience that's receiving the testimonial knowledge, they have to basically, it's within their right to challenge the one who's giving the testimonial knowledge. You have, for example, Emerita Professor Keith Lehrer. He's brilliant. You know what he says? He says, in order for testimonial knowledge to be valid or to be constituted as knowledge, you have to be trustworthy in your assessments on the trustworthiness of others. Now, if a lot of you know about Islamic theology, this is in line with what Muslims have been discussing for 1400 years in the study of prophetic traditions, ilm al-hadith, when we talk about the trustworthiness of the reporter. Anyway, I went too much on testimony. The point is, testimonial knowledge is a fundamental source of knowledge. And I want to end this part by asking you a question. How do you know China exists? Many of us, it's fundamentally based on testimonial knowledge. Even if you have pictures, even if you have images on a map, someone told you that's the picture of Chinese people in China. And even if you met a Chinese person today, well, you have to just believe what they said. It's testimonial, really. Also, what's testimonial is your mother being the one that gave birth to you. You have zero proof. Don't even tell me you have a DNA test certificate, because you don't. And if you did, that's still testimonial. It's a certificate, a testimony that someone did something. You didn't do it yourself, right? So from that point of view, how do you know your mother gave birth to you? You only know because of testimonial evidence. The fact that your dad told you, the midwife told you, there's a certificate, there may be a video, right? The video is not empirical because you didn't come out like that, bro, did you? With a beard and glasses and a laptop. Imagine, that would be a miracle. God exists, right? So you weren't capitated from your mother's womb like that, were you? No, you had a different face. Obviously far more cuter. So, yeah. So from that point of view, someone have to tell you, hey, that was you when you were a child. So when it comes to things like China and the existence, the fact that you believe that your mother gave birth to you, it's all testimonial knowledge. So it's not true that science is the only source of truth, the only yardstick for truth, because we have other sources of knowledge like testimony.